Sell all of your comics right now. Sell all of your comics right now. That is literally the advice that I am seeing people give online. And I personally feel that it is the worst possible advice that anyone could ever give you. You have to ignore this advice. That is my opinion. Ignore these general statements. If anyone is saying you should buy all the comics all the time, you might want to ignore that. If they're saying you should sell all of your comics, you probably want to avoid that advice as well. Part of the reason why I say that is because this advice is so general. It lacks specificity and, in my opinion, is not actionable in any way, shape, or form. This hobby of comic book collecting is a hobby of nuance in so many different ways. It comes down to the grade and the condition. Is it a newsstand or is it direct? What year did it actually come out in? Which one was first? Which one was second? It is a hobby of nuance, and these broad statements about do this, do that is so generic that you cannot do anything with it, because the truth of the matter is that it depends. It depends upon what you are trying to accomplish. It depends upon the type of book that you're actually looking at. When you think about financial advice, you should take it from someone that has a certain amount of expertise. And even then, you have to take that advice, think about it, and decide for yourself what you actually want to do. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the things that you might want to consider doing with your comic collection. There is no doubt that the comic book market is starting to slow. I actually saw signs of this back in October and may have mentioned it in a video or two, but the signs are there that the market is slowing. But that does not mean that the market is actually crashing. Those two things are not necessarily the same. And the reality is that a slowing market does not affect all comics the exact same way. That is one of the challenges, is that people tend to look at comic book collecting as a homogeneous market when it is not. There are discrete and specific sectors that make up comics and collectibles that move at different paces. And so you have to evaluate what is actually happening in the market, and as a result of what is happening, which sectors of the market will be impacted. To that point, you may see a slowdown in some of the modern comics that are coming out. You might not see that same slowdown when you're talking about Silver Age comics or Golden Age comics, which move at a different rhythm. Heck, we're still seeing record-breaking prices being paid for high-grade Silver and Golden Age comics on a regular and consistent basis. This is the evidence that not all of the market is affected in the same way in the event of a slowdown. Slowdowns are also part of a normal, healthy economy. Anyone that will tell you comics only go up in value are not paying attention. Markets do not move in that way. Just look at what happened with cryptocurrency recently. I want to say that the market overall was down about 15 to 20%. And as a result of that, a lot of people started to bail on cryptocurrency. Other folks, including myself, decided to actually invest heavier into cryptocurrency. Why? Because I believe in the long-term potential of crypto. And I also believe in the long-term potential of comic books. One of the things that I try to do when we're talking about my collection or we're talking about my stock and investment portfolio is that we look at what is actually in there. We look at the assets. We evaluate what is happening with those individual assets, and we make decisions based upon what we're actually seeing. Put another way, when the stock market takes a decline, I don't sell off all my stocks, but I will divest myself of certain assets while simultaneously increasing my investment in other assets, because those will actually do better in certain types of market conditions. Comics are no different than that, as I've illustrated before. Potentially, what you're going to see is certain parts of the modern comic market take a hit, but Silver and Golden Age, and even some moderns for that matter, may continue to do well. You cannot look at it as a homogeneous thing. So I once knew a guy that sold his house in the state of California, and he moved himself and his wife and one kid into an apartment, and his plan was to jump back into the market once the housing market actually crashed, because that was part of the advice that was being thrown about, was that the housing market was unsustainable, that it was going to crash, and so he bet big that he could jump back in at a later date and be able to get a really nice house for less money. Fast forward a couple of years, add a kid or two, and this guy has found that he is priced out of the market. He failed to anticipate that the general advice wasn't the best advice for him. He bet big and he has missed out. Now, I'm not saying that comics and housing are the same. What I am saying is that you have to think about what makes the most sense for you, and you have to decide whether the general advice is something that is meaningful to you, or whether you, depending upon your situation, should do something entirely different. Up until this point, I've spoken about the dollars and cents associated with comics, but the reality is that comic books serve so many other types of purposes. There is the artistic appreciation, right? The cover art that is incredibly compelling, that draws people in. There is the entertainment factor that comes from actually reading comics, and there's also the nostalgia. So when people are saying you should sell all your comics, there are lots of reasons why you should just ignore this advice. At the end of the day, it is your comic book collection, and you'll look at that collection from any number of vantage points, including from the dollars and cents perspective. Until that point, you have to look at your assets. You have to look at what is actually important to you, and based upon that, make some informed decisions. As always, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I definitely want to encourage you to leave your thoughts behind. What do you see happening in the market? And as a result of that, what might you do different? Leave those comments behind, because I am curious as to what your thoughts are. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.